Now, on the population policy, Michael, what did you make of Julie Gillard's contribution this morning on that?
Well, I saw I think a few things. This whole budget was framed on Julie Gillard's rejection of Kevin Rudd's Big Australia. You might recall this based on around the Treasury modelling of the 36 million by 2050. So the whole story of the budget is we've got a huge China boom, we've got an Asian century, we're going to skill up Australians to benefit from this. But I think the budget also announced, and it wasn't announced in the Swan's budget speech, an increase in our permanent migration intake to 185,000. This is the largest permanent migrant intake we've ever seen in Australia. And on top of that will come the temporary visas of short-term workers for the mining boom. What I think we're seeing here is that the government will be forced to have quite a solid migration program because the labour market is tightening so much. You'll have wage pressures increasing, and unless they do have immigration going at a pretty solid level, they'll get inflation going up and interest rates going up, and that will destabilise the economy and it'll come back to hurt them politically.
That's what the budget told us on Tuesday, and that was the whole budget story. Then on Friday they bring out a population policy which won't put a number on it, which sort of says, look, you know, we don't need more people, and if we do, we're certainly not going to add them all up and tell you the total number. We also know that Treasury told both parties after the election in the red and blue books that we're going to get close to 36 million, even with a decrease in the net migration intake.
So
that's where we're headed anyway. So this kind of glossy brochure to kind of gloss over it and say, yeah, we really feel your pain in traffic queues is kind of insulting, really.
Except there are two things that are good about it. One of them is they had to put a full stop on the whole population issue, which so essentially they've sort of squirmed out of it. But just think of all the things that could have been in the population strategy that would have been pretty disastrous. There was so much scope for really bad picking winners, dopey policy, and we can only be relieved that they didn't go for any of it. You know,
so it's good because it's a cop-out rather than stupid.
It's good for what's not in it.
Well, I've got to say that, you know, having looked at this sort of stuff for 30 years or so, this would have to be, the Tony Burke Sustainable Population Strategy would have to be the most facile document that you could ever imagine. And I think it is really, it's treating the policy you talk about, you know, yes, Abbott and the Liberals, you know, not coming up with proper policies and talking on slogans. This population policy on Friday was, you know, it was vapid, it was full of glossy photographs. All it said was we're not going to force people to go to certain areas. But this whole thing about community by community, it's just rubbish.
Well, and if the whole problem has been that we haven't been planning infrastructure well enough for where the population has gone, how are they meant to plan infrastructure well enough in the future if we don't actually have a conversation about how many people there are going to be and where they're going to live?
So all these things about, you know, how many schools, where is our infrastructure going, you do have to have, and the idea that we have, as Tony Burke's saying, we're not going to have a target, that's a straw man issue. No one's saying there should be a target for population, but you give an idea of what's going on in the economy. If you are going to have an Asian boom, as we're going to, you will draw more people in. So you have the government just trying to totally not talk about the fact that the current population and immigration settings will give you a net immigration intake of around about 180,000 to 200,000 people a year. That will lead, that's basically what the Treasury projected, and that will lead to your 36 million people by 2050.
Whether you call it big, small or medium.
Which is what Julia Gillard supposedly has rejected.